One stop for gas becomes a trap. No witnesses, two deputies, and a child who suddenly can't breathe when his inhaler is knocked away. The mother's hands are held back. The boy sends a recording into the night that will summon help and expose the truth. A few minutes earlier, Amara Fields was measuring nothing but miles and rain. It begins on a lonely stretch of highway, under a sky bruised with the promise of a storm, in a moment so ordinary it could belong to any of us. And it reminds us that the most profound power isn't the power to intimidate, but the power to heal. Amara Fields knew the anatomy of exhaustion. It lived in the marrow of her bones, a dull ache that started in her feet after a 12-hour shift in the emergency room and worked its way up to her soul. She was a healer, a mender of broken things, fractured limbs, panicked lungs, terrified hearts. But tonight, there was only the low hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers pushing away the first spatters of rain. Beside her, her son, Miles, was a small, warm presence in the passenger seat, his face illuminated by the soft glow of his tablet. He was 10 years old, a universe of curiosity and kindness packed into a small frame. He had his father's thoughtful eyes and her stubborn chin. He built intricate worlds with plastic bricks and dreamed of exploring distant galaxies. His mind, a constellation of questions about black holes and nebulae. They were on their way home from visiting Amara's mother, a 4-hour drive that had stretched into 5, a journey through deepening twilight into the belly of the night. The candy wrappers and empty juice boxes on the floor told the story of their trip. It was a good tired, the kind that comes after laughter and family and a grandmother's cooking. But as the miles dissolved behind them, the city lights faded, replaced by long, dark stretches of pine forest and the occasional lonely farmhouse. The fuel gauge, which she had been determinedly ignoring for the last 20 miles, finally had its say. The little orange light blinked on, a persistent, silent warning. Amara sighed, a soft sound swallowed by the car's hum. "Looks like we have to make a pit stop, buddy," she said, her voice a little rough with fatigue. Miles looked up, his screen reflecting in his glasses. "Are we almost home?" "Almost," she promised, though she knew almost was still another hour away. She scanned the darkness ahead. This was the part of the drive she disliked, the in-between places where towns were just names on a green sign and help felt a million miles away. A sign flickered into view, its neon letters buzzing and indistinct in the growing drizzle. Gas. Next exit. It was less an invitation and more a statement of fact. She took the exit, the car descending a concrete ramp onto a poorly lit local road. The gas station was an island of harsh fluorescent light in a sea of black. It was old, one of those places that time seemed to have forgotten, with peeling paint on the columns and a single, flickering light above the door of the convenience store. A sheriff's department cruiser was parked off to the side, nestled in the shadows by a dumpster, its presence neither reassuring nor threatening, just there. It was a silent observer in the lonely night. Amara pulled up to one of the pumps, the only customer. The rain was coming down harder now, a steady, insistent drumming on the roof of the car. She took a deep breath, the exhaustion pressing down on her. Just get gas, pay, and get back on the road. Home. Her own bed. The thought was a beacon. "Stay here, sweetie. I'll be right back. Lock the doors," she said, her voice carrying the practiced calm of a mother and a nurse. Miles nodded, already absorbed back into his digital world. Amara stepped out of the car, the damp, cool air a shock after the warmth inside. She shivered, pulling her thin cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The air smelled of wet asphalt and gasoline. She swiped her card, the machine groaning in protest before finally accepting it. As the pump began to click and whir, a different sound cut through the rhythm of the rain, the crunch of boots on gravel. From the shadows near the cruiser, 2 figures emerged, moving with a deliberate, unhurried pace. They were deputies. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with a hard set to his jaw and eyes that seemed to sweep over her and find her wanting. The other was shorter, younger, with a nervous energy about him, a follower trying to mimic the swagger of his partner. The tall one, whose name tag read Mercer, stopped a few feet from her. The shorter one, Pike, hung back slightly. "Everything all right here tonight?" Mercer's voice was a low drawl, thick with something that wasn't concern. It was the sound of boredom looking for a cure. Amara kept her expression neutral, her hands steady. She had dealt with fear, with anger, with grief. She knew how to handle volatile men. You kept your voice even. You made no sudden moves. You became a calming presence in their storm. "Everything's fine, officer," she replied, her tone polite, respectful. "Just getting some gas before the last leg home." Mercer's eyes drifted from her face to her license plate, then back again. A small, knowing smirk played on his lips. "You're a long way from home, aren't you? What brings you out to our neck of the woods so late?" The question was a hook, baited and cast. It wasn't a question of curiosity, it was an assertion of power. "This is our space. You are a guest, an unwelcome one." Amara refused to take the bait. "Visiting family," she said simply, her gaze fixed on the numbers ticking upward on the pump. She projected an aura of unremarkable normalcy, a tired mother just trying to get her child home safely. But Mercer wasn't interested in normalcy. He was a predator of routine, a man who found his purpose in disrupting the peace of others. He took a step closer, invading her personal space, the smell of stale coffee on his breath. "Family, huh? Let's see some identification, and the vehicle's registration." It wasn't a request, it was a command, wrapped in the thin veil of procedure. The demand hung in the damp air, a challenge. Amara's training, her years of navigating high-stakes human interactions, screamed at her to comply, to be small, to be agreeable, to make the threat go away. She nodded slowly, her heart beginning a low, heavy drum against her ribs. This was no longer just a stop for gas. It was a test, and she had a terrible feeling that there was no right answer. Her hand moved toward the car door, but Mercer's voice, sharp and sudden, stopped her. "Hold it. Just stay right where you are. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." The friendly facade had vanished completely, replaced by a cold, undisguised authority. The rain fell harder, a gray curtain isolating the three of them under the buzzing, artificial lights of the station, turning a simple errand into the beginning of a nightmare. The world had shrunk to this puddle of light, this concrete island. Amara felt a familiar switch flip in her mind, the one that activated in the ER when a patient was crashing. It was a state of heightened awareness, a radical calm that settled over the fear. Every detail became sharp, vivid. The way Deputy Pike shifted his weight from foot to foot, his eyes avoiding hers, fixed on some point in the middle distance. The way Deputy Mercer's hand rested casually on his belt, near his weapon, a constant, unspoken threat. The rhythmic squeak of her own windshield wipers, a maddeningly mundane metronome counting down to... What? She kept her hands visible, away from her body. "My wallet and registration are in the car, officer," she said, her voice a study in placidity. "My son is in the passenger seat. I don't want to startle him." Mercer's eyes flicked to the car, his gaze lingering on the silhouette of Miles's head. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. "Your son," he repeated, the words flat. He looked back at Amara, his expression hardening into a mask of professional skepticism. "Right. Well, let's you and I have a little chat first. Pike, keep an eye on the vehicle." Pike nodded, taking a half-step forward, positioning himself with a clear view of the car doors. He was a wall, a silent partner in this slow-motion intimidation. Amara felt a surge of protective instinct, a low, primal growl in her chest that she had to consciously suppress. Her son was right there. Her every move, every word, had to be measured. For him. "What is this about, officer?" she asked, allowing a sliver of polite confusion into her voice. She knew what it was about. It was about her black skin, her out-of-county plates, her presence in a place where she was not expected, not wanted. It was about a power imbalance as old as the dirt beneath their feet. Mercer let out a short, humorless laugh. "Just routine police work, ma'am, making sure our community stays safe." He gestured vaguely at the dark, empty road behind them. "You see, we've had some reports. Suspicious vehicle. Matches your description." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The lie was the point. It was a tool to disorient her, to make her question her own reality, to establish that he was in control of the narrative. Her car was a common sedan, as unremarkable as 1,000 others. There was nothing suspicious about it. Her mind raced. She thought of her brother, Avery. He was military, an Air Force medic. He'd drilled into her what to do in these situations. "Stay calm, Amara. Be polite. Don't argue. Remember their names. Note the time. Look for cameras." Her eyes darted to the convenience store window. Taped to the inside was a crooked handwritten sign, "Cameras temporarily out of service." A cold dread, sharp and swift, pierced through her practiced calm. They were in a blind spot, a place without witnesses. This was intentional. "I understand," she said, her voice tight, "but I assure you, we were just passing through. I'm a nurse at City General Hospital. I just finished a long shift yesterday. We're tired, and we just want to get home." She offered him a piece of her identity, a credential of respectability. Nurse, helper, someone on the same side of the societal ledger as him. It was a plea for connection, for him to see her as a person, not a problem. It didn't work. If anything, it seemed to annoy him. "A nurse, huh?" he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Everybody's got a story. Tell me, nurse, why are you so nervous? Got something to hide in that car?" He took another step, closing the distance between them until she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the faint stubble on his chin. His presence was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on her. Inside the car, Miles lowered his tablet. He couldn't hear the words clearly through the glass and the rain, but he could read the scene like a book he knew by heart. He saw the tension in his mother's shoulders, the rigid set of her spine. He saw the way the tall officer leaned in, his body language a physical threat. Miles's chest began to feel tight, a familiar and unwelcome sensation, like a band slowly constricting around his lungs. He tried to take a deep, slow breath, just like his mom had taught him. In, hold, out. But the air felt thin, useless. The wheeze started, a faint, high-pitched whistle on his exhale. He didn't want to scare his mom. He knew she was already scared. He fumbled in the glove compartment, his small hands searching for the blue plastic of his emergency inhaler. Amara heard the click of the pump nozzle shutting off. The tank was full. Her reason for being there was over. "Officer, my gas is paid for," she said, trying to steer the encounter toward a conclusion. "Can I please get my wallet so I can show you my ID and we can be on our way?" "We'll be on our way when I say we're on our way," Mercer snapped, his patience, a thin veneer to begin with, now completely gone. "You seem to think you're in charge here. Let me be clear. I am." He gestured toward the car. "Now, I'm going to ask you again. Are there any weapons or illegal substances in that vehicle?" The accusation was so absurd, so far from her reality, that for a moment, Amara could only stare at him. Her, with her trunk full of her mother's Tupperware containers and a bag of laundry. Her, whose most dangerous possession was a pair of blunt-tipped trauma shears in her work bag. The injustice of it was a bitter taste in her mouth. "No, officer," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "There is nothing illegal in my car. My 10-year-old son is in my car." She emphasized the word son, hoping to ignite some flicker of empathy, some recognition of the child who was now a pawn in this cruel game. But Mercer's eyes were flat, devoid of feeling. He was on a path, and he would not be diverted. He enjoyed this. The fear he was creating was a kind of fuel for him. And as the rain continued to fall, washing the world clean around them, Amara realized she was trapped in his filth, and the stain was spreading. The tension outside the car was a living thing, a coiled snake. Amara could feel its suffocating pressure, and more importantly, she knew Miles could feel it too. She glanced toward the passenger window and saw his small face, pale in the dashboard's glow. She saw the telltale sign she knew as well as her own heartbeat, the slight flare of his nostrils as he struggled to draw a full breath. The wheezing was getting worse. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to claw its way up her throat, but she swallowed it down. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Officer," she said, her voice losing its polite detachment, now infused with the urgent authority of a medical professional. "My son is having an asthma attack. I need to get his inhaler from the car, right now." Mercer's face twisted into a sneer of disbelief. It was the same look she'd seen on people in the ER who refused to believe a diagnosis, who saw conspiracy and compassion. "Oh, here we go," he scoffed, turning to Pike with a look that said, "Get a load of this." "Suddenly the kid can't breathe. What a convenient excuse. You people are all the same. Always a story, always a drama." The words, "you people," landed like a physical blow. It was the quiet part, said out loud, the ugly truth of the encounter laid bare. This wasn't about a traffic stop. This was about contempt, about a deep, curdled prejudice that saw her not as a mother or a nurse, but as a type, a problem to be managed. Amara's blood ran cold, then hot. "This is not a drama," she said, her voice low and trembling with a tightly controlled fury. "It's a medical emergency. I am a registered nurse, and I am telling you my child is in respiratory distress. Move aside." For a split second, she was no longer a civilian on the side of the road. She was Nurse Fields, in charge of a critical situation, her training and instincts taking over. She took a step toward the car door, her movements precise and purposeful. Mercer blocked her path, his body a solid wall of resistance. "I didn't say you could move," he growled, his hand clamping down on her upper arm. His grip was like iron. A jolt of outrage shot through her. The violation of it, the casual assertion of physical dominance, was staggering. She wrenched her arm free, her eyes blazing. "Get your hands off of me! My son needs his medicine." Inside the car, Miles's world was shrinking. The wheezing was louder now, a painful whistle that filled his ears. His chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. He saw the officer grab his mother. He saw the fury and fear on her face. A different kind of fear seized him then, colder and sharper than the fear for his own breath. It was the fear for her. He remembered his Uncle Avery's words from a conversation they'd had last summer. "The world can be tricky, Miles. Sometimes the people who are supposed to help don't. The most powerful thing you have is the truth. Your phone can be a tool. It can capture the truth." His fingers, clumsy with panic, found his phone. He swiped it open, his thumb hovering over the camera icon. No, video would be too obvious. Audio. He fumbled to the voice memo app and, shielding the screen with his body, he pressed the red record button. A tiny digital timer began to count the seconds. The truth was being captured. Amara managed to get the passenger door open. "Miles, baby, breathe with me. Slow breaths." "Where's your inhaler?" she asked, her voice a strange mix of clinical calm and maternal desperation. "In glove box," he gasped, each word a monumental effort. She reached across him, her fingers finding the familiar blue plastic. She pulled it out, a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. But as she turned, Mercer was right there, his face contorted with rage. He saw the inhaler in her hand as an act of defiance, a rejection of his authority. "I told you to stop," he yelled, and with a swift, violent motion he slapped it from her hand. The small blue device flew through the air, clattering against the wet pavement before skittering out of sight under the car. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence. It was the sound of a line being crossed, a point of no return. For a moment, no one moved. Pike's face had gone slack with shock. Amara stared at the spot where the inhaler had disappeared, her mind refusing to process what had just happened. He had taken her son's breath away. He had weaponized his power against a child's life. The nurse in her receded, and the mother rose up, a lioness. But before the roar could escape her lips, Miles made his move. His mind was surprisingly clear. He knew he had to do two things: get the recording to someone safe, and get help. He opened his messages, his fingers flying across the screen, typing a pre-programmed shortcut for his uncle's number. Uncle A. The text was short, desperate. Gas station. Cops hurting mom. Can't breathe. He attached the audio file, the recording of the last horrifying minute. He pressed send. The message flew out into the rainy night. A digital flare shot into the darkness, a desperate plea for rescue. And then he did the only other thing he could think to do. He laid on the horn, his small body pressing down with all his might. A long, piercing, continuous blast shattered the night. A raw, desperate scream for help from a boy who had no voice left to use. The blare of the car horn was a physical assault, a sound that ripped through the manufactured control of the scene. It was a child's primal scream, translated through the machinery of the car. For a moment, it stunned both deputies. Pike flinched back as if struck. Mercer's face, already a mask of fury, darkened further. He rounded on the open car door, his voice a roar over the horn's blast. "Shut that off. Shut it off now." But Miles didn't move. He kept his hand pressed down, his eyes, wide with fear and defiance, locked on the officer. He was small. He was struggling for air, but in that moment, he was immovable. Amara used the distraction. While Mercer was focused on the car, she dropped to her knees, her hands scrambling on the cold, gritty asphalt beneath the vehicle. Her fingers brushed against something plastic. The inhaler. She snatched it, her heart pounding with a desperate, frantic relief. She scrambled back to the car door, shaking the inhaler vigorously. "Miles, open your mouth, baby. Big breath in," she commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. Miles finally lifted his hand from the horn. The sudden silence was as shocking as the noise had been. He coughed, a deep, ragged sound, and opened his mouth. Amara administered 2 puffs of the albuterol, the medicine hissing into his desperate lungs. She held his face in her hands, her eyes searching his. "Breathe with me, Miles. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Slow. You're okay. Mama's got you." Far away, on a different dark road, a cell phone buzzed on the console of a pickup truck. Avery Fields glanced at the screen. A text from Miles. His brow furrowed in concern. Then he saw the words, "Cops hurting mom. Can't breathe." His blood ran cold. He was an Air Force para-rescueman, a PJ. His entire life was a testament to calm in the face of chaos. He had jumped from planes into combat zones, performed medical procedures under fire, pulled injured soldiers from the wreckage of helicopters. His pulse was trained to remain steady when the world was exploding. But this was different. This was his sister. This was his nephew. This was family. His training kicked in, a series of clicks in his mind, processes running, options being assessed. He immediately pulled over. He saw the audio file attached to the text. He pressed play. The sound filled his truck. Mercer's taunting drawl. Amara's steady, firm voice. The sickening slap. Miles's ragged wheezing. The horn. It was a recording of a world coming undone. He didn't hesitate. He didn't call 911. That would go to the local dispatch, the same one that sent Mercer and Pike. He scrolled through his contacts to a number he had for the Regional State Patrol Barracks, a direct line for a duty sergeant he'd met during a joint training exercise. The phone was answered on the second ring. "State Patrol, Sergeant Riley." Avery's voice was pure, undiluted authority. It was the voice he used when lives were on the line. "Sergeant, this is Master Sergeant Avery Fields, USAF. I have an officer-involved critical incident in progress. I have an audio recording of two of your county deputies harassing my sister and nephew and assaulting them by denying my nephew, a 10-year-old asthmatic, access to his medication. They are at the Route 7 gas station, just off exit 42. I am 10 minutes out. I need your immediate assistance. This is a potential civil rights violation and a medical emergency." There was no panic in his voice, only facts. He was speaking their language. He wasn't a frantic civilian. He was a fellow professional reporting a critical failure. Sergeant Riley, a 20-year veteran, heard the steel in Avery's tone. "Understood, Master Sergeant. We have a unit 5 minutes from that location. They will proceed with caution. Stay on the line with me." Back at the gas station, the immediate crisis had passed, but the aftermath was a toxic sludge of rage and fear. Mercer, furious at being defied, had pulled Amara away from the car. "You think you're so smart," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "You and your brat. You just assaulted an officer." "You assaulted my child," Amara shot back, her fear now completely eclipsed by a righteous anger. "You knocked his life-saving medication out of my hand. It's all on tape." The mention of a recording made Mercer pause. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "What tape? There are no cameras here." Pike, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice shaky. "Cade, maybe we should just let them go. This is getting out of hand." "You stay out of this, Russ," Mercer snapped, not taking his eyes off Amara. He saw the defiance in her, and it was like gasoline on his fire. He couldn't let her win. He couldn't let her walk away with that look in her eyes. It was then that new lights appeared. Not the familiar red and blue, but the piercing white of headlights cutting through the relentless rain. A heavy-duty pickup truck pulled into the station, parking in a way that blocked the exit, its engine a low, powerful rumble. Avery Fields stepped out. He was not a large man, but he moved with an economy of motion and a quiet confidence that made him seem to fill the space. He wore jeans and a simple jacket, but his posture was military straight. His eyes, calm and assessing, took in the entire scene in a fraction of a second. Mercer holding his sister's arm, Pike standing nervously by, Miles in the car, his face pressed against the glass. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He simply began to walk toward them, his presence a tangible shift in the night's power dynamic. He didn't look at the deputies. His focus was entirely on his family. "Amara," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Miles, are you okay?" The sound of her brother Isa's voice was the first crack in Amara Siwasi armor of composure. The relief was so overwhelming it almost buckled her knees. He was here. Help was here. Before Mercer could react to the new arrival, a second vehicle pulled in behind Avery's truck. A state patrol cruiser. Its lights were off, its approach silent and swift. It parked, pinning the sheriff's cruiser in place. The doors opened, and two state troopers emerged. The senior officer, a man with graying temples and a chest full of commendations, was Sergeant Riley's man on the ground. He moved with the same quiet authority as Avery. The arrival of the state troopers changed the entire equation. Mercer's authority, which had seemed absolute just moments before, evaporated. This was no longer his scene. He was no longer the one in charge. He let go of Amara's arm as if it had suddenly become red hot. His face was a mixture of confusion and belligerence. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, turning to the state troopers. "This is a county matter. We have it under control." The senior trooper, a sergeant whose name tag read Donovan, ignored him completely. His attention was on Avery, a silent acknowledgement between two professionals. Then he turned to Amara, his expression serious but not unkind. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Donovan with the State Patrol. Can you tell me what happened here tonight?" Mercer started to interrupt to spin his version of the story. This woman was non-compliant. Her kid assaulted me with the car horn. Donovan held up a hand, a simple gesture that carried immense weight. "I will get to you, deputy. Right now, I'm speaking with her." The public rebuke silenced Mercer. He stood, fuming, as Amara, her voice shaking but clear, recounted the events. The stop without cause, the intimidation, the lie about the cameras, and, finally, the moment Mercer had slapped the inhaler from her hand. "He tried to stop me from giving my son his medicine," she finished, her voice thick with emotion. "He was struggling to breathe." Donovan's gaze shifted to Mercer, his eyes like chips of ice. "Deputy, is that true?" "She's lying," Mercer spat. "She was hysterical. I was trying to de-escalate." It was a weak, pathetic defense, and everyone there knew it. The lie was transparent. Avery stepped forward, holding his phone. "She's not lying, Sergeant, and I have proof." He pressed play. The audio filled the night air once more, a damning, irrefutable record of the truth. Mercer's voice, dripping with condescension. "Sure, he does. Another excuse." The sharp, distinct sound of the slap. Miles's panicked, wheezing breaths. Pike's nervous shifting could be heard in the background. As the recording played, Mercer's face went from red to a sickly, pale white. Pike looked down at his boots, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The truth, captured by a 10-year-old boy, had just dismantled their world. When the audio finished, a heavy silence descended, broken only by the sound of the rain. Sergeant Donovan's face was grim. He had heard enough. He looked at Mercer, then at Pike. His voice was quiet, but it carried the force of a judgment. "Deputies, Mercer and Pike, place your service weapons on the hood of your vehicle. Then place your hands on the hood and do not move." The order was stunning. To be disarmed in the field by another agency was the ultimate humiliation. It was a declaration that they were no longer considered trustworthy officers of the law. They were now suspects. Mercer hesitated, a spark of rebellion in his eyes. "You can't do this." "I can, and I am," Donovan said, his hand moving almost casually toward his own sidearm. The message was clear. There was no room for negotiation. Pike, looking utterly defeated, complied immediately. He unholstered his weapon and placed it gently on the wet metal of the cruiser's hood. After a tense moment, Mercer followed suit, his movements jerky and filled with rage. He slammed the gun down with a loud clang. Just then, a light flicked on in the convenience store. An older man in a stained undershirt and slippers peered out, blinking at the scene. He unlocked the door and stepped out, drawn by the commotion. Sergeant Donovan's partner walked over to him. "Sir, did you see what happened here?" The man, the station owner, looked from the disarmed deputies to Amara and the state troopers. He wrung his hands, his face a mask of fear and indecision. I didn't see nothing," he mumbled. "My cameras are on the fritz." Donovan walked toward him, his expression unreadable. "Son, I've been a cop for 25 years. I know when someone is lying to me. We have an audio recording of a potential felony assault on a child committed by those two men. Obstruction of justice is also a felony. I'm going to ask you one more time. Why are your cameras not working tonight?" The owner's resolve crumbled. He looked at Mercer, who shot him a look of pure venom, then back at the stern, unyielding face of the state trooper. He took a deep, shuddering breath. They ain't broken," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "Deputy Mercer. He told me to turn 'em off when he pulled in. Said it was for officer safety. He does it sometimes." The confession hung in the air, the final damning piece of evidence. It wasn't just a moment of bad judgment. It was premeditated. They had intentionally created a blind spot, a place where they could act without consequence. But they hadn't counted on the witness in the passenger seat. They hadn't counted on the quiet courage of a boy with a phone. And they hadn't counted on the unshakable bond of a family that refused to be broken. The story of that rainy night at the gas station did not stay contained within the yellow police tape. Miles's audio recording, now evidence in an official investigation, was leaked. It spread through the town of Northwood like a shockwave, first through social media, then picked up by a local news blogger, and finally exploding onto the regional news channels. The raw, unfiltered audio was horrifying. It allowed no room for ambiguity. Listeners heard the calm professionalism in Amara's voice, the escalating aggression in Mercer's, and the desperate, wheezing breaths of a child. The town, a sleepy, close-knit community that had always prided itself on its quiet decency, was forced to look at an ugly truth about itself. The initial reaction was a fractured one. A vocal minority immediately rushed to the defense of the deputies. "They have a tough job," they wrote in online comments. "You don't know the whole story." Blue Lives Matter. They were defending not just two men, but an idea of their town, a version of their world where things like this didn't happen, or if they did, there had to be a good reason. But for the vast majority of Northwood's citizens, the recording was sickening. It was a betrayal of the trust they placed in law enforcement. Parents listened and imagined their own child in that car, struggling to breathe. Nurses and doctors listened and felt a visceral kinship with Amara, recognizing the cool-headed competence that had been met with such brute force. The day after the incident, a small group of nurses from City General Hospital, Amara's colleagues, stood across the street from the county sheriff's department. They didn't chant or hold angry signs. They just stood there in their scrubs during their lunch break, a silent, powerful statement of solidarity. By the next day, their numbers had doubled. They were joined by teachers from Miles's elementary school, their faces etched with concern. EMTs and paramedics who worked alongside the sheriff's department every day stood with them, their presence a quiet rebuke of the deputies' actions. Parents from the local PTA, members of Amara's church, and strangers who had only heard the story on the news, all came. It was not an angry mob, it was a vigil, a quiet, collective bearing of witness. They were saying, with their presence alone, "We see you, Amara. We hear you, Miles. This is not who we are." Inside the county building, a storm of a different kind was raging. Sheriff Brody, a man just 2 years from retirement, was caught in a political hurricane. He was a decent man at his core, but a man who valued loyalty and hated public conflict. He was being pressured by the deputies' union to stand by his men, while simultaneously being inundated with calls from outraged citizens. The decision, however, was quickly taken out of his hands. The district attorney for the county was a sharp, progressive woman named Elena Vance. She had won her election on a platform of police reform and accountability. She listened to the audio, reviewed Sergeant Donovan's preliminary report, and knew immediately that this was a crucible moment for her administration and for the community. She called Amara and Avery to her office. The room was filled with law books and the faint scent of coffee. Vance was direct, her demeanor professional but infused with a genuine empathy that immediately put Amara at ease. "Ms. Fields," she began, "first, on behalf of this county, I want to apologize for what you and your son endured. It was a complete and catastrophic failure of the public trust. Second, I want to assure you that we are taking this with the utmost seriousness. We have an ironclad case against Deputy Mercer for assault, reckless endangerment, and official misconduct. Deputy Pike will face charges for misconduct and failure to intervene. We can, and we will, pursue the maximum possible penalties." She leaned forward, her eyes locking with Amara's. "I am prepared to throw the book at them. You have every right to want vengeance. You tell me what justice looks like to you, and I will fight for it." Amara listened, her hands clasped in her lap. Avery sat beside her, a silent, supportive presence. She thought about the word vengeance. She thought about Cade Mercer's face, twisted with hate. She thought about the fear in her son's eyes. A part of her, a deep and wounded part, did want to see him punished, to see him stripped of his power and forced to face the consequences of his cruelty. But then she thought about the people standing outside the sheriff's department. Her friends, her neighbors, strangers. She thought about the town of Northwood, now torn apart, arguing with itself, wounded and confused. Punishing two men might feel good for a moment, but would it heal anything? Would it stop this from happening again to another mother, another child? She had spent her entire career putting things back together, stitching wounds, setting bones, restarting hearts. Her instinct was not to break, but to mend. "I don't want vengeance, Ms. Vance," Amara said, her voice quiet but firm. The DA looked surprised. "I want change," Amara continued, a new strength flowing into her. "I want to make sure that no other parent has to watch an officer treat their child's life like it's worthless. I want to build something better out of this ugliness. Can we do that? Can justice look like healing?" Elena Vance stared at the woman sitting across from her. She had expected anger, tears, a demand for retribution. She had not expected this quiet, steel-spined grace, this radical vision for a different kind of justice. A slow smile spread across the DA's face. "Yes, Miss Fields," she said, a newfound respect in her voice. "I think we can. Let's talk about what that looks like." The meeting in the district attorney's office became the seed from which a forest of change would grow. It was no longer just about prosecution. It was about transformation. Elena Vance, energized by Amara's vision, cleared her schedule. She, Amara, and Avery sat around a large oak table, a legal pad and 3 cups of coffee between them, and began to architect a new future for Northwood County. "The problem isn't just 2 bad apples," Avery stated, his military precision cutting straight to the core of the issue. "It's the barrel, the system that allowed this to happen, the lack of oversight, the lack of training, the U.S. versus them mentality." "Exactly," Vance agreed, scribbling notes. "So, accountability is the first pillar. That means irrefutable objective evidence in every interaction. Body cameras," Amara said immediately. "Mandatory. Always on. No more excuses about them being broken or turned off for officer safety. If you are interacting with the public, you are being recorded. Period. And the footage needs to be accessible," Avery added. "Subject to public records requests, reviewed quarterly by a civilian oversight board. Transparency is the only disinfectant." Vance nodded, writing furiously. "Pillar 1. Absolute transparency. Mandatory audited body cameras. I love it." "But that's reactive," Amara pointed out, her mind working like it did when creating a patient care plan. "It shows us what went wrong. We need to be proactive. We need to prevent it from going wrong in the first place." "Training," Avery said, "but not the check the box, watch a video kind of training. It has to be real. It has to be taught by the right people." Amara leaned forward, her passion evident. "Let us teach them. Let the nurses and the EMTs come in and teach de-escalation. We do it every single day with patients who are scared, in pain, or mentally unstable. We can teach them to see a person, not just a perpetrator. And we can teach them basic medical assessment, how to recognize the signs of a panic attack, a seizure, an asthma attack. If Deputy Mercer had an ounce of that training, he would have seen a child in distress, not a suspect's trick." "Pillar 2. Community-led training," Vance said, underlining the words. "De-escalation and emergency medical recognition, taught by local medical professionals. That's brilliant. It builds expertise and it builds bridges at the same time." There was a pause as they considered what they had built. It was a strong foundation. But Amara felt something was still missing. This was all about the police. It didn't address the other side of the equation, the community's fear and mistrust, a wound that this incident had ripped wide open. "What about the people who are afraid to even call the police?" she asked. "What about the families who want to seek help because they worried about who will show up at their door? We have to rebuild that trust. We have to meet them where they are." She thought about her work, about the people who came to the ER for primary care, because they had nowhere else to go, often late at night when other doors were closed. "Let's create something positive," she proposed, the idea taking shape as she spoke. "Let's use the first responders, the good ones, to build goodwill. What if we started a program of free pop-up night clinics? We could set them up in fire stations, in community centers, in church basements. Nurses like me could volunteer our time to do basic health screenings, check on kids, answer questions. And the police officers and EMTs could be there too, not as enforcers but as helpers, handing out juice boxes, reading to kids, just being present as members of the community. We could show people that the uniform can be a symbol of safety. Avery's face broke into a proud smile. Elena Vance put her pen down, a look of awe on her face. "Pillar 3, proactive trust building," she said softly. "Community health outreach, that's revolutionary, Amara." They sat in silence for a moment, looking at the blueprint they had created. It was ambitious. It was comprehensive. They decided to call it the Miles Act, in honor of the little boy whose courage had started it all. Presenting the Miles Act to the County Board of Supervisors was a battle. There was pushback, primarily from the Sheriff's Union and more fiscally conservative board members who balked at the cost of the body cameras and the overtime for training. The debate was heated, televised on the local public access channel. The meeting room was packed with citizens from both sides of the issue. Just when it seemed like the proposal might stall, an unexpected person asked to address the board: Deputy Russ Pike. He walked to the podium, not in his uniform but in a simple collared shirt and slacks. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He was no longer the smirking follower. He was a man, broken and humbled. He faced the crowd, but his eyes found Amara in the front row. "My name is Russ Pike," he began, his voice cracking. "And I was there that night. I stood by and I did nothing while my partner terrorized a mother and her child. I didn't have the courage to stop him. I was a coward, and I will have to live with that for the rest of my life." He turned to Amara directly. "Ms. Fields, Miles, I am so profoundly sorry. What happened was wrong, and there is no excuse for it." Then he turned back to the board. "I came here tonight to say that you have to pass this, the Miles Act. It's not about punishing cops. It's about making us better. It is about giving us the tools and the training to be the peacekeepers we're supposed to be. I was part of the problem. Please, let me be part of the solution. I'll be the first one to sign up for that training. I'll be the first to wear that camera. We have to do this." His raw, heartfelt confession sucked the air out of the room. The opposition faltered. The moral weight of his apology, his endorsement, was too much to overcome. The Miles Act passed with a unanimous vote. The change in Northwood County wasn't instantaneous, but it was immediate and tangible. The passing of the Miles Act was like the breaking of a fever. The tension that had gripped the community began to recede, replaced by a cautious but determined optimism. The first phase was the rollout of the body cameras. Boxes of them arrived at the sheriff's department, and every single sworn officer, from the sheriff down to the newest rookie, was fitted and trained. There was some grumbling, but the public mandate was so strong that resistance was futile. The cameras became a part of the uniform, a constant, silent third eye that promised accountability. Cade Mercer was not there to receive one. He had been fired the week after the incident and was now facing a grand jury indictment. His story became a whisper, a cautionary tale about what happens when power is allowed to curdle into cruelty. His fall was swift and absolute, but the community's focus was already shifting from punishment to progress. The second phase, the community-led training, began in the auditorium of the local high school. The first session was on medical emergencies. The instructor, standing before a room full of deputies, was Amara Fields. She was not there as a victim. She was there as an expert. She spoke with the calm, clear authority of a seasoned nurse, explaining the physiological mechanics of an asthma attack, showing them pictures of what constricted airways look like, playing audio of what a wheeze sounds like. In the third row sat Russ Pike, not in uniform. He had been suspended pending the outcome of his own misconduct hearing, but he had come on his own time. He took meticulous notes, his pen scratching across a legal pad. He asked intelligent questions. He listened with an intensity that was almost painful to watch. He was a man desperately trying to learn a language he should have known all along, the language of empathy. The third and most transformative phase was the launch of the first pop-up clinic. It was held on a Tuesday evening in the cavernous, brightly lit bay of Fire Station Number 1. The fire engine had been pulled out onto the tarmac, and the space was filled with folding tables, medical equipment, and boxes of donated toys and books. Amara and 3 other volunteer nurses set up stations to check blood pressure, listen to lungs, and administer flu shots. Miles was there, acting as the official greeter. He handed out stickers to the younger children, his earlier trauma now sublimated into a quiet sense of purpose. He was no longer just the boy from the gas station. He was a co-founder of a movement. The turnout was slow at first. Families were hesitant, peeking in from the doorway, unsure of what to expect. The sight of 2 uniformed deputies near the entrance was, for some, still a barrier. But these deputies weren't standing with their arms crossed, watching. They were pouring juice and handing out cookies. One of them, a young woman, sat on the floor with a group of toddlers, reading a storybook in an animated voice. Russ Pike was there too, in civilian clothes, stacking boxes and carrying supplies. He worked quietly in the background, seeking neither attention nor forgiveness, content to simply be useful. Slowly, people began to come in. A young mother got her baby's persistent cough checked out. An elderly man who hadn't seen a doctor in years had his blood pressure taken and was gently urged to make an appointment with a cardiologist. A teenager who was worried about a sports injury got advice from an off-duty paramedic. The gas station on Route 7, once a symbol of fear and isolation, underwent its own transformation. The owner, deeply ashamed by his role in the incident, had not only installed a new, state-of-the-art, multi-camera security system, but he had also repainted the entire station. The peeling columns were now a cheerful, bright white. He planted flower boxes around the perimeter. He made a sizable donation to fund the second pop-up clinic. He was, in his own way, atoning. The space was being reclaimed, its toxic memories slowly being overwritten by acts of kindness and community. One evening, Amar saw Russ Pike talking to a young boy who was clutching a new toy fire truck. Pike was showing him the lights on a police cruiser parked outside, explaining what each button did. The boy's face was filled with awe, not fear. Amara watched them, and for the first time she felt the hard knot of anger in her chest finally begin to dissolve. Healing, she realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about building something new and beautiful on top of the ruins. 1 year later, on a perfect sun-drenched Saturday afternoon, the gas station on Route 7 was unrecognizable. The pumps were decorated with red, white, and blue balloons. The air, which had once smelled of rain and fear, was now filled with the savory smoke of barbecue and the sound of laughter. The first annual Northwood Community Cookout was in full swing, an event sponsored by the Sheriff's Department and the City General Hospital Nursing Union. It was a celebration of the Miles Act, a testament to a year of hard-won progress. The symbolism was potent and intentional. They had returned to the scene of the crime, not to dwell on the trauma, but to consecrate it as a place of rebirth. Police officers, state troopers, and firefighters stood shoulder to shoulder behind long tables, wearing aprons over their uniforms, serving hot dogs and potato salad to their neighbors. Sheriff Brody, his retirement postponed, was on corn-on-the-cob duty, a wide, genuine smile on his face. Russ Pike, reinstated to the force after a 6-month suspension and glowing reports from his new supervisors, was managing the grill. He moved with a quiet humility, his interactions with the public gentle and respectful. He was a different man, a man who had walked through fire and come out changed. Miles, now 11, was in the middle of it all, a vibrant, joyful spark. He was no longer the small, wheezing boy in the passenger seat. He was a leader. He was explaining the principles of aerodynamics to a young state trooper, using a paper airplane to demonstrate lift and drag. The trooper listened with rapt attention, completely engaged. Miles laughed, a free, unburdened sound that was the event's true anthem. His asthma was well managed, But more importantly, his spirit was healed. He moved through the world with a newfound confidence, a boy who knew in his bones that his voice mattered. Amara stood near the edge of the crowd, a cup of lemonade in her hand, watching her son. Avery was beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Elena Vance joined them, her professional demeanor softened by the festive atmosphere. "Look at this," Vance said, her voice filled with wonder. "A year ago. Who would have thought?" "Amara thought," Avery said, squeezing his sister's shoulder. "She saw this when the rest of us just saw the darkness." Amara watched as Russ Pike handed a hamburger to a little girl, leaning down to ask her if she wanted ketchup. She saw Sergeant Donovan from the State Patrol in a deep, friendly conversation with a group of teenagers. She saw bridges being built, one conversation, one shared meal at a time. The wound wasn't gone. A scar remained, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. But it was a clean scar, a healed scar. It no longer ached. It was simply a part of their story, a testament to their resilience. We asked at the beginning where true strength comes from. This is where. It's in the heart of a mother who chooses to mend instead of break. It is in the courage of a boy who uses his small voice to speak a deafening truth. It is in the humility of a man who admits his mistakes and dedicates himself to becoming better. Real power isn't about the authority you're given. It's about the compassion you choose to show. It's not about controlling the vulnerable. It is about having the courage to protect them, to lift them up, to ensure they are seen and heard. The world can be a dark and frightening place, but one person's quiet determination can be enough to light the way home. Share this story. Remind someone in your life who feels overlooked that they are not invisible. Their quiet strength, their steady heart, might just be the light the world is waiting for.